Third Declension, Chapter 10. So far we've looked at declensions of nouns, and we've looked at two declensions. The first declension had roots ending in alpha or eta, and examples of the alpha would be thalassa, and the eta would be phone. And as I said, most first declensions are feminine. Then we had second declension, and those roots ended in an omicron. And we had for masculine logos, and an example that was neuter was paideon. Now we have the third declension in Greek, which people are more frightened of than is really necessary. It's just another declension. It has some strange things that happen, but they're very predictable things once we're used to them. So it's another declension is all. The difference is where we had very specific vowels, first declension alpha or eta, or second declension omicron. A third declension are roots ending in a consonant. So obviously there's a large range of possible words. And I just give here an example of sarc with that little asterisk here, meaning this is the root. So this would be a root ending in kappa, and this would be a third declension noun. The third declension has identical endings in the masculine and the feminine. The final consonant of the root often merges with a sigma, and we'll see this a little bit later. But the root sarc, and you'll see the little sign there of root, the asterisk, when a sigma is added to it, we get a sarx, a kasi. The third declension, it is essential that you know the genitive. And we'll look at why it is, but the genitive is the most important thing to know. In our vocabulary, remember, we have noun, and then we have genitive, and then article. And with a third declension, you'll see why it is essential that you have that second part, which is the genitive. We have it's called a square of stops. And the square of stops tells us how consonants will change. In this case, the square of stops is final consonants which touch a sigma. We have three different types of main consonants. The first is called a labial, and that has to do with your lips. And the labial is a b, p, or a f. And when a labial touches a sigma, a psi is formed, which we kind of expect. A p and a sigma is a psi. The velar is formed when the tongue is at the top of the mouth. And those are kappas, gammas, and chis. And when a velar touches a sigma, it turns into, predictably, a kasi. Kappa sigma kasi. A dental is when the tongue touches the teeth, and we get tau, delta, and theta. When any of the dentals touches a sigma, we get a sigma. The sigma kind of overwrites the sound of the dental. And we have a couple others. We have nu or nu tau, and if either of them touches a sigma, again, we get a sigma. We're going to look at third declension endings very quickly, and I want to show you how little, in a sense, there is to learn about these. So let's look at it quickly. We know already that the masculine and feminine endings are identical, so there's only one ending that we're going to learn here, and the neuter is a different ending. So the nominative ending is a sigma usually, and the neuter has no ending. The genitive is an omicron sigma, and you're going to kind of confuse this with the sigma that is the nominative singular for the second declension. But that is really just a sigma. This is an omicron sigma added to the root. The genitive, omicron sigma. Dative, iota. Neuter, iota. The accusative is usually an alpha, and the neuter is predictably the same as the nominative, no ending. The nominative plural, masculine and feminine, is an epsilon sigma. The neuter is always an alpha. The genitive is always own, genitive plural. The dative, masculine and feminine, is a sigma iota. And the alpha, of course, is a sigma. The neuter is obviously a sigma iota. And the accusative, masculine and feminine, is alpha sigma. Neuter, alpha. Nominative and accusative are always the same. So, these are the things that we know automatically, that the genitive and dative are always the same. In the third declension, that means all the endings, masculine and feminine and neuter, are all the same in the genitive and the dative, singular and plural. Nice, huh? Next thing that we know is the neuter is always the same in the nominative and accusative, both singular and plural. And in a plural, it is always alpha. And then, of course, we know that the genitive is always own. So if you look at this in terms of the colors, you'll see how few things that there are to learn for the third declension. The third declension of sarcs, and its root is sigma alpha rho kappa sarc. The nominative is the addition of a sigma, and we get sarcs. We got a merge there with a kappa sigma. That means flesh. The genitive, and this is our important one, omicron sigma, gives us sarcos. And the important part of the genitive is we can see at the genitive what the root is. You can't see it in the nominative, but you can see sarc in the genitive, and that is the basis upon which we will build the rest. That is of, from, flesh, or the possessive. Data is a iota, as we expect, but remember the dative before subscripted under a long vowel. But the ending in a third declension is a consonant. So we get sarci. There is no subscript because the iota doesn't subscript under consonant. And that is in by for flesh, and this is the indirect object. The accusative is alpha. And we get sarca, flesh, the accusative. So far we have nominative sigma, genitive omicron sigma, dative very recognizable iota, and the accusative alpha. And the accusative is going to show up in several places, and we obviously, when we look at it, we think, first declension. But we just have to remember, we're going to know this vocabulary word. We're going to know it is a third declension, so we're going to expect the accusative of being an alpha. The plural, the nominative is an epsilon sigma. And so we get sarces. And this is fleshes, if such a word exists. The genitive, obviously, for all of us, in all of our tenses, is own. So we get sarcone of four fleshes, and also the ownership. Sigma iota, and you're going to see this has the same qualities that the nominative does. That is, it begins with a sigma, so things are going to happen. And we're going to get sarci with a movable new sarcsin. And one of our rules is, because the nominative singular and dative plural endings both begin with a sigma, when they merge with a stem, the stem will be modified usually. In this case, the kappa sigma, the same thing that happens in the nominative singular, will happen in the dative plural. In by 4 with fleshes, and this is also the indirect object. Accusative, alpha sigma, sarcos, fleshes. Socia esoncias. This is another of my little silly attempts at memorization. If we take all of the endings that I've told you so far and we kind of make words out of them, we get socia for the singular and esoncias for the plural. So we get socia esoncias, and that is the endings for the masculine and feminine. Third declension adjective, like all adjectives, must agree in case, number, and gender, but obviously it no longer is going to agree with endings, right? We have first and second declensions. If we have a third declension adjective, there's no way it can have the same endings as a first and second declension. And the other way around. If it's a third declension noun and it has a 2-1-2 adjective, that adjective is going to have endings in different forms. However, they will still agree in case, number, and gender, even if they look different. So we've already seen that there are 2 first declension endings. And with the third declension, with these adjectives, we're going to get 2 forms. 3-1-3, and that's going to be, remember we had the 2-1-2, right? Masculine was second declension, feminine was first declension, and the neuter was second declension, right? So with the third declension, we're going to get 3-1-3 nouns, that is, the masculine is third declension, feminine is first declension, and neuter is third declension. But a lot of nouns are going to be, and adjectives, are going to be 3-3. And the reason for that is the masculine and feminine have the same endings, so we can easily have a 3, which is masculine and feminine, and 3 neuter. So we have 3-3 masculine and feminine are the same with different neuter endings. And this we have an example of tis, t. Tis is the masculine and feminine, t is the neuter form. And then we have 3-1-3 third declension adjectives, which have a masculine third declension, a first declension feminine, and a third declension neuter, and we get pas, pasa, pon. Third declension 3-1-3 of the adjective pas, pasa, pon each. The stem or root of this is pont, and you'll see that little asterisk there that tell us that this is the stem. And we know that nu tau plus a sigma is going to give us a sigma. So the masculine nominative is going to show a merge because the masculine nominative is a sigma. Now there are 2 things that are really important that you know the endings of. The easiest way to learn the second declension, the 2-1-2 as we had it before, was with the adjective agathos, agathe, agathon. If we learn that 2-1-2, you basically have everything that you need to know about 2-1-2 declension. The third declension, what I think is the best way to go, is to learn the adjective pas, pasapon, each in the singular and all in the plural. So one of the things that I'd like you to do is just go through and memorize this 3-1-3 declension. We'll look at it and I'll show you the kind of shortcuts for it. The nominative is pos, and this is happening because the sigma has touched a new tau, and of course it's going to merge and it's going to come out as sigma. So we have pos. And the neuter, one of the rules of Greek is that a tau can never be at the end of a word. So the tau falls off. There's nothing to add on a neuter, so we get pon. And we know that in the neuter, the nominative and the accusative are always the same, so we're going to get pon pon. The genitive, pantos, in the masculine, and in the neuter, the masculine and neuter agree in the genitive and dative, is also pantos. The dative, panti, iota, is a sign of the dative. Panti in both the masculine and the neuter. And then in the accusative, we get panta. The nominative, masculine, is pantes. The neuter is always alpha in the plural. So the nominative and accusative are always alpha. So we get panta, panta. Genitive is always the same in the masculine and neuter, and own is always the ending. So we get pantone, pantone. The dative, same thing is going to happen as happened in the nominative singular. That new tau is going to touch the sigma iota ending for the dative, and it's going to become pasi. The same thing, of course, will happen in the neuter. And the accusative, just has to be learned, is pantas. Okay? Now the feminine is a first declension. So this is a different stem, actually. And this is a first declension ending. Nothing new to learn here. This is simply a first declension. So you have third declension, first declension, and third declension. So you get pasa, passes, passe, and the iota subscript, pasan, nominative, passai. Own is always the ender for the genitive, but you'll notice that pason, because the stem is pas here, is pason, where the genitive for the masculine and neuter, which has a stem of pont, is pontone. But you'll still recognize that own. The thing about it is, if I should happen on a test to give you pason, you can tell by that sigma that this is not a third declension. So we get passais for the dative, as we expect in the feminine, and pas as. Now, even though it has the same ending as the accusative masculine, it's that new tau. Okay? The masculine always goes back to the stem, so we get pantas, and the feminine here is actually on a different stem, and it is passas. Interrogative and indefinite pronouns. These are really easy once you know a couple things about them. The interrogative pronoun, and I'll tell you what these are. Interrogative pronoun is a pronoun that introduces a question. So if you have an interrogative pronoun, you have a question mark at the end. And who threw the ball? What ball was thrown? Who and what are interrogative pronouns. Now, in Greek, the accent in an interrogative pronoun is always on the first syllable. If it is on the second syllable, it is not an interrogative pronoun. It is translated as who in the masculine and feminine, and what or why in the neuter. Indefinite pronouns are just what they sound like. They are indefinite, and they refer to indefinite things. Someone, something, anyone, anything. Someone threw the ball. Something was thrown. The indefinite pronoun is never accented on the first syllable. Okay? So here's a rule. If it's accented on the first syllable, it's interrogative. If it is not accented on the first syllable, it is indefinite. And this is translated as someone in the masculine and feminine and something in the neuter. Let's look at the interrogative and indefinite pronouns. This is a third declension. The root is tin, and with the sigma added in the nominative we get tis, and with the neuter losing the ending we get t. So tis, t are the nominative forms. So the interrogative is who or what. It's a question, and we expect a semicolon at the end of the sentence. The nominative is tis. The sigma has overridden the nu, and we get a sigma. So tis, neuter is t, and of course the nominative and accusative are the same. Genitive is tinnas, and we can see the root again with tin, and all of them are the same. Masculine, feminine, neuter are the same. Tinnas. Dative yoda, tinny, tinny, and the masculine, feminine ending is alpha, tinna. So we get tis, tinnos, tinny, tinna for the masculine and feminine, and the neuter is t, tinnos, tinny, t. The masculine and feminine would be who. The neuter would be what. The plural, the masculine, feminine, is tinnes. The neuter, the same in nominative accusative, is tinna. Oh, remember the alpha at the end of all neuter, nominative, and accusative ending plural. And this case, I just had this line here to show you that there are actually three possibilities for the alpha. So if you were parsing it and you had to look at it, you would realize that always the neuter, accusative, and the nominative in the plural and with alpha. But in the third declension, the masculine and feminative accusative also ends with alpha. So we have three possibilities. The genitive is always the same, and they also agree because they're the masculine always agrees with the neuter. Tinnon, tinnon. The dative, the same thing happens in the nominative. The sigma merges with the nu, and we get, because the ending is sigma iota, we get tissi with the nu, and of course the neuter is always the same as the masculine, so we get tissi, and the accusative we get tinnas. The indefinite is basically the entire structure that I said for the declension. The only difference is the accent. In the interrogative, the accent is always in the first syllable. If there is a one syllable, in this case the nominative, it will be accented. The indefinite is always on the second syllable. Obviously, if there's only one syllable, there's not going to be an accent. Vocabulary, chapter 10. Now, I had so much fun last time going through the vocabulary on little cards that I decided to do it again. So we're going to go through the vocabulary words one by one. And these are going to be adjectives on the whole. And remember now, we're going to have third declension. But this one, hagias, is a 2-1-2. Hagias, hagia, hagian. Hagias, hagias. Rough breathing, hagias. And this is holy as an adjective. And the plural noun is saints. This is where we get the saints from, the holy ones. Protas, protas, protas. Protas is a 2-1-2 declension, first or earlier. A, no accent on this one. Remember, A with an accent was you are. A with no accent here is if. A may, a may, a may. literally, if not, except. Hes, rough breathing. Hes mia hen. Hes mia hen. Hes mia hen. This is a 3-1-3 declension. And you'll notice that the first declension, the middle one, the feminine, is a totally different root. The masculine and the neuter have the same root. It's hard to tell here, but the root is hen. But the feminine has mia as its root. This means one. One God. A day. A day. A day. A day is now or already. Anama. 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 This is a third declension, and this one is what is called a mot stem. And we see anamat. And the mot stem is always neuter. Remember, a word cannot end in a tau in Greek, so the stem is anamat, but obviously for the neuter, which doesn't have an ending, the tau falls off. So we get anama, anamatas, and ta. So this is a third declension. We look there for the genitive ending, the tas, anamatas, and it is neuter, name or reputation. Another 3-1-3 with a different middle stem for the first declension. This is just a negation of hes miachen, which is one, and this would be not one. So we have udes, udemia, uden. Udes, udemia, uden. Udes, udemia, uden. And this is no one, none, or nothing. Ace or haste is one, so the negation of it is no one. Pas, pasa, pan. Pas, pasa, pan. Pas, pasa, pan. Pas, pasa, pan. Each, and the plural is every. This is the one that you're going to learn as an ideal to learn for the 3-1-3 declension. And we have singular each, and plural is all. Peri plus the accusative. Peri, 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 around. And the nice thing about a peri, well, we'll do the next one. Peri plus the genitive means concerning or about. So I think of this as periscope, and you can turn it around or about. Round about. Round about. Sarcs, sarcas, he. Sarcs, sarcs, sarcs. When we look at the genitive, we see that the stem was sarc, and the genitive omicron sigma is added to it. So a sigma was added to the nominative, and we get sarcs. And in this case, this is a feminine. Flesh or body is feminine. Sun, sun, sun. Sun is with, and it always takes the dative. Soma, soma, soma. Soma is another mot stem. We see the genitive matas, and remember that a Greek word cannot end in a tau, so the tau falls off. This would have been somat. The tau falls off, and we get soma, somatas, and its neuter. All mot stems, third declension, are neuter. Body. This is opposed to sarx, which is flesh. Soma is body. Teknon. 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 This is the second declension, and it's neuter. Child is neuter, or descendant. This is specifically used also for the child of Israel, rather than just any child. So when Jesus refers to a child, and he refers to why throw bread to a dog instead of the child, he's referring to the child of Israel. Tis T. Tis T. Tis T. The stem is tin. There is no accent on the first syllable, so this is an indefinite pronoun. Someone or thing, certain one or thing, or anything. Tis T. Pronounced the same way as the previous one, the indefinite pronoun. This is the interrogative pronoun, and we know this because the accent is on the first syllable. And the interrogative is who or what, which or why.